SpaceX will be the largest IPO in history. But beyond its size, why is the excitement for this company out of this world? In today's episode, my guest Carl Jensen, a longtime Tesla and SpaceX shareholder, lays out the 10 to 20-year investment thesis to help us understand if Elon Musk can deliver on the most ambitious business plan in the solar system. Welcome to the Access IPOs podcast, where we explore opportunities to invest in the world's most innovative and disruptive pre-IPO companies. I'm Craig Stevens, founder of Access IPOs, and a lot of you have found this podcast through my episodes about SpaceX. Both institutional and individual investors are all really excited about this company. So I wanted to give you a deeper dive into why all the hype for this company. It's already going to be the biggest IPO ever, but what is this company doing that has investors so excited? I'm not an expert on this topic, so I brought in Carl Jensen to talk about the SpaceX IPO and the long-term outlook of what the business plan looks like. He's a longtime Tesla shareholder and invested in SpaceX in 2022. He would have invested earlier if he could have gotten access. Carl isn't a Wall Street banker or a tech guy in Silicon Valley. He's just an ordinary retail investor like you and me who saw an extraordinary company and found a way to invest early on. So he's here to take us through the business model, what the company is doing right now, why it has such an extraordinary business moat, and then we look at some of the long shots and what SpaceX is planning to do over the next decade or so. This interview is a bit slower paced and a little longer than a usual episode, but I really wanted to dive deeper into SpaceX instead of just giving you a quick podcast episode. There's timestamps in the description, so if you want to skip ahead to any particular topic, should be easy to do so. With that, here's my conversation with Carl Jensen. Carl Jensen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Craig, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Yeah. So Carl, you're a long-term Tesla investor, Tesla bull, SpaceX investor, but you're not like a Wall Street guy, right? You're not a Silicon Valley bro. You just liked SpaceX and found a way to invest. Is that right?
That is correct. And Craig, we talked a little bit beforehand, and I had to look up what a Silicon Valley tech bro is because I'm like, maybe I am one because I was a coder and I like technology a lot. And then I took a little online quiz and it said, do you wear Patagonia? Do you own crypto? Have you read Paul Graham essays? And I can answer no to every one of those questions. So I do not think I'm a tech bro, which I think is a good thing, I hope.
Yeah, not to criticize tech bros, but I'm just kind of an ordinary investor, never been on Wall Street, never been in Silicon Valley. I think you're that same guy and just trying to invest in these companies that everyone else wants to invest in, but we don't have the opportunity a lot of times. Just to back up a second, so Carl and I, we go way back. We're both old-time fire bloggers from 2013, I think. I think we met at a conference in 2015. Carl runs the website 1500 Days, and some of you know me as Retire Before Dad. That's my other website. And so we've both been kind of in this financial independence space for a long time, but we're also both in this pre-IPO investing area. And so every time we see each other at a conference, we start talking about SpaceX and these other startups that people want to invest in. And you're one of the only guys I know that's actually been able to invest in SpaceX. Can you tell us about how you came to investing in SpaceX, both lead up into your investment, and how did you actually invest in SpaceX?
Oh man, I'd have to go back to the time of the dinosaurs because I'd have to go back to my youth, and I'm old. So as a kid, I was always obsessed with space stuff. Like I had all these space toys, a little space shuttle thing. And I always paid attention to the space, pun not intended. So whenever there would be a space shuttle launch and I'd be home from school, I'd be watching that or a rocket launch, super obsessed. And then I heard about this company, SpaceX, and I had known who Elon Musk was through PayPal and X, some of his earlier companies. And I started following this company and saw what they were doing and knocked my socks off. It was incredible. So around the year 2020, I'm like, man, I really want to invest in this thing, but it's private. And I started looking into it back then, but I couldn't find a way that I felt comfortable doing it. Like there's all these SPVs out there, but some of them are like a sub SPV of another SPV, or they have crazy high fees just because people are so desperate to get into this. So finally, 2022 came around. And this guy I connected with on Twitter, X, whatever that thing is called now, said, do you want to invest in SpaceX? If you're interested, let me know. So I'm like, yeah. And I went into it pretty skeptical as well. But it turned out it was legit. So I bought in 2022 through an SPV.
So do you want to share, or do you remember like what the valuation was approximately at the time of that investment? Like what was kind of the terms and some of the basics?
Oh, I believe the valuation was under 200 billion at that time. It might have been 129 or 175. I know there were 2 rounds that year, I think. And to be clear, these were tender rounds where the employees are allowed to sell shares.
Yeah, so of course, you're an accredited investor. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to invest this way. You invested through an SPV, through a connection you made online, which, funny enough, like that happens quite a lot. People connect online and find investment opportunities, or they find, podcasts where we talk about this stuff. So it sounds like kind of just a normal trajectory, but you connected with the right guy and you found the right deal and you got your investment.
Yeah, there was a lot of work behind it because I had, like I said, it took me 2 years after I decided I want to invest in it to figure out a way to do it. And I had followed this person for years and built up a little relationship where I knew I could trust him. So it was not easy. And I see some of the fees people are paying now and what they're trying to do to get into this. And it's quite crazy. It's very frothy.
Yeah, and if you had gotten in when you wanted to get in, which would have been a couple years earlier, it probably would have been a much better valuation as well.
Oh, way to rub it in, Craig. I think about that pretty much every single day. But
yeah, we all think about that. I mean, there's people want to invest in this company, and that's kind of what we talk about here, is that these private companies are growing so fast, but we're all sitting here watching them in awe. But most of us just don't have access, and that's what the show's about. We talk about ways to access these companies. So just a level set here with the SpaceX IPO. We're recording this on May the 4th. Happy May the 4th day. May the 4th be with you. So this is a Monday, and we're in May, and we're expecting this S1 filing to drop this month, possibly mid-May, possibly the end of May. And when that S1 filing drops, that's when the SEC releases the document that it lays it all out there. We finally get to see what the numbers look like, what the different businesses look like. So we're expecting to see that this month, which should lead to a June IPO, probably mid to late June. Elon has set that timeline, and when Elon wants to get something done, he gets it done. So they're talking about a $75 billion capital raise at a $1.5 to $2 trillion market cap, which is by far the largest IPO in history, and it's not even close. Does that sound like some crazy numbers to you? I think the SpaceX revenue was $16 billion maybe in 2025, and they're talking about up to maybe a $2 trillion IPO. Does that sound reasonable, crazy? How do you feel about that?
Oh, man, Craig, I feel like that's a trick question because it is crazy, but it's also not crazy at the same time. One of my favorite quotes, supposedly this came from Wade Gretzky, is you don't go to where the puck is, you go to where the puck is going. So you're not buying SpaceX for what it's doing now. You're buying SpaceX for what you expect it to do in 10 years. You expect at least some of Elon's crazy ambitions to be fulfilled. And if they are, then the current numbers will look like nothing if they get to all his crazy ideas and implement this stuff. I think it was just announced last week, there's rumors that SpaceX is buying like 0.5% of the state of Louisiana to start a new launch complex. So think of Elon what you will, but he does not think small.
And it's not like all of his ambitions need to work out. So many of them are going to fail. I remember back in 2018 or something, he said, we're going to be on Mars in 2024. And it was just like matter of fact. And we're not on Mars, and we're not even close. So he says things to inspire everybody, but his employees to work really hard and to figure things out. But when you look at the complex, when they show videos, I think they shared a video a few weeks ago of what's going inside one of these Starship plants, and just the amount of money that's been invested, like the scale is just mind-blowing at this point.
It's crazy. I had a chance to go check out their facility in Boca Chica. I did not have any insider access, but the dude just built launch pads like next to the beach. There's like 2 of them right there, and you can almost walk up to them. And I also went to the Kennedy Space Center, and there you don't get anywhere close to stuff. And there's people like at all hours of the night, you could see them like welding the launch tower. Like at 2 a.m., you look over there and you see the sparks coming off it. So it's insane what they're doing. They're going very, very fast and very, very big.
You're a long-term Tesla shareholder as well, right? So you're not like new to investing in Elon. You've been long Tesla for a long time, right? Did you invest in the Tesla IPO, or did you invest shortly after?
I did it in 2012. So not at IPO, but pretty close to it.
So this episode is all about the 10-year, 20-year bull case that we're going to get into sort of the details of all the SpaceX businesses and sort of the total addressable markets. But a few just key questions about this IPO that we're still waiting for in this S1 filing. The key thing that I'm looking for is going to be the float. So in a typical IPO, they raise, say, in this case, $75 billion, and that's the entire float. They're talking about potentially allowing existing shareholders to maybe not have as long of a lockup period, which, we want to see more shares float because we know so many people are looking to buy for the long term and they're not really trading this thing. Have you heard anything about your shares and the potential for lockup period? Or are you getting any information from the way that you invested?
I have heard absolutely nothing. I did have an investor call a couple months ago and they said expect a 6-month lockup. So that would be December if it IPOs in June, but they were just guessing, no solid information.
That's the normal period. There's also an opportunity sometimes for existing shareholders, institutional, to sell shares into the IPO. So they might float, say, $75 billion, but additional shareholders may sell there. And we know Elon has a lot of influence over people, right? So he might say, hey, well, if you want a piece of my future business, maybe, sell some existing shares. He needs help to make sure that this thing goes off smoothly. And a small float is dangerous, especially when they're talking about bringing SpaceX into the QQQ and the other index funds. On the earlier side, usually it takes several months or a year or more. But if the index funds have to start buying this thing and then you have individual investors buying, we don't want to see a crazy spike, right? We want to see fair value when it's public. The one thing that's unique about this deal is Elon has said 30% is going to go to retail IPO investors. And so that hopefully will give us the opportunity to invest, even though demand is going to be extraordinarily high. And then he's also talked about Tesla shareholders being allowed to invest or favoring Tesla shareholders somehow, but we haven't got any information about that either. So Tesla shareholders are kind of wondering if they might get a chance to invest at the IPO price. We won't know anything until reporters leak that or in the S1 filing.
Yeah, super interesting. So just to reiterate what you're saying, Craig, because I'm interested too. We want a bigger float because if there isn't a bigger float, if there are less shares available, the price might spike because there's less supply and demand. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we want a more reasonable price. And I think it's interesting that Elon seems to be favoring retail. I think that's smart because he has a lot of fanboys, and those are the ones who are probably going to hold on to it. They're not going to trade like the algorithms or Wall Street. They're going to hold on to it for the long term.
Investors want to invest for the 10 to 20. They want to see Elon realize these crazy ambitions that we're about to get into here in a moment. It introduces an interesting dynamic because a lot of times people invest in IPOs just to get that pop and they want to get out of there, or momentum traders invest. And I've never really seen a deal. First of all, we've never seen a deal this big or with this much hype. I think back to Airbnb and Uber is maybe the highest hype deals in recent memory, but this one is just going to be extraordinary. And so long-term investors who want to participate, they're going to buy up as much as they can and they're not going to sell. And so who's going to sell? And that's where the float and the potential for the lockup to allow early investors to sell some shares. All right, so talking about SpaceX from this 10-year to 20-year perspective, I want to try to understand what is behind the hype. We have so many investors who want to invest, and I can't tell you how many people reach out to me. They watch a video and they email me and say, I want to invest this. How do I do it? And they've been saying that for years now. How do I invest in this deal? You found a way, and there's some funds we can invest in. So I want to try to understand, just from your perspective, what is behind the hype of this deal, and not so much the IPO, but the long-term prospects of SpaceX. So why are you bullish, just from a big picture standpoint, why are you bullish about SpaceX right now?
The most amazing thing SpaceX ever did is land a rocket. And I'll give you a little thought experiment to fully comprehend this. Imagine if every time you flew on a plane, that plane was one-time use, you had to throw out the plane and everyone had to fly on a new plane every time. Flights would cost $500,000 each to get to Florida. What SpaceX did, which is incredible, is they landed at least the first stage and reused it. So you're not throwing the thing in the trash. And rocket engines, if you're not SpaceX, you're paying up to $20 million for a rocket engine. And there's multiple rocket engines on every rocket. rocket and to just dump that thing in the ocean is ludicrous. So the amazing thing that SpaceX did was to land the Falcon 9 rocket, and they did that for the first time in December of 2015. And no hyperbole here, that's one of the greatest engineering achievements of humankind. It took the next person almost 10 years to do it. Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' rocket company, did it in November of 2025. So they just accomplished this, and it's kind of clunky. They've reflown it once. The Falcon 9 has reflown 600 times now, which is crazy, or they've landed it 600 times. It's an amazing achievement. And SpaceX has taken it up a notch by catching the Starship booster, that's their new rocket system, back on the launch pad. And that gives you a huge advantage because with Falcon 9, they landed it on a drone ship, so they got to bring the thing back. It takes a week or two and bring it back to the launch pad. Elon's vision is this. If you can land the thing back on the launch pad, you do a check, make sure the thing is okay, fill it back up with fuel, and if you believe Elon, it'll be flying again maybe the next day or maybe within hours. So the reusability is key to this whole thing. And what that does, Craig, is it makes launches super, super cheap. Because again, you're not throwing this thing in the trash or the ocean. You're reusing it multiple times. I think SpaceX has reused some of their Falcon 9 boosters 30 times, which is crazy. So it's all about reusability.
And the Starship is going to be able to carry a lot more of a payload into space, which is going to reduce the cost dramatically more, well ahead of the competitors, maybe 10 years ahead of Bezos or any other launcher.
Yeah, it's insane. I think 200 tons, something like that, to low Earth orbit. And the other thing they're going to do, which they haven't done yet, which is much more difficult, is catching the second stage, which is Starship. That's the stage that would actually carry the cargo or humans to space.
Yeah, it's not like the old space shuttle that used to come in that slow landing. It's going to be a different engineering feat.
It's very, very difficult. That thing, I think the booster is traveling at maximum speed of 4,000 miles an hour, which is still cooking. That's like 6 times the speed of sound. The second stage is like almost 20,000 miles an hour. You have to survive re-entry. It's very, very extreme. That was the main issue with the space shuttle. It had very expensive heat tiles on the bottom, and they would fall off. So it would take them months and months to refurbish that thing to get it ready for the next flight. And Elon wants hours, not months.
Yeah, I live in the D.C. area, and we have a Air and Space Museum by Dulles Airport, and you can actually see the space shuttle up close. It's very cool. We were talking, I guess, in preparation for this podcast, you said something to me that I think really paints a picture for the 10 to 20 year bull case, and that once these Starship rockets are going into space regularly, safely delivering payloads, it unlocks business models that we don't even comprehend right now. There's just these ideas that are going to develop because of the reduced cost. So we hear about data centers in space and everything else, mass drivers on the moon. We hear about these things, but there are these other imaginative business models that we just don't even really know about yet that could be unlocked from a reduced cost of launch.
Yeah, it's amazing. The example I give people when talking about this total addressable market concept is the lithium-ion battery. I think that thing was invented in the 80s, and they were very, very expensive when they came out, and eventually they became cheaper, so they started showing up in laptops, and then they started becoming super cheap, and now we interact with lithium-ion batteries with multiple devices multiple times per day. If you have AirPods on, which you do, or have a smartphone, which who doesn't have one of those, you're interacting with that battery. So by bringing the cost way, way down, the use cases for that exploded. Same with solar panels everywhere. I'm sitting under them right now because they're on my roof, but I never would have put them on 20 years ago because they would have cost $100,000. Now they cost, I think these were like 8 or 9, and they've since gone down by a third since I've put them on this house. So yeah, Craig, once you bring down the cost significantly, you open the market up to things you couldn't even imagine. So here's a great example. The Starlink network, and I'm not a rancher and I know little about cows, but if the ranchers wanted to keep the cows in place, without a fence, what they would do is put these special collars on them, and the collars communicated with this antenna on the ranch, and the cows can be trained so the collars emit noises and vibrations, and it keeps the cows in a certain spot. The issue with this is it's very expensive because you have to build this big antenna thing in the middle of your ranch. Now, because of SpaceX, these cows have collars now with a little solar panel on the back, again, another total addressable market thing, and a lithium-ion battery. So the cows have collars that are communicating with satellites in space. The rancher can go on his laptop in real time, see where every cow is, and change the parameters of the fence. So he could say, okay, I want the cows to be 1 kilometer over this way and redraw it, and then boop, the cows wander over to there because the collars redirect them. That would not have been feasible before Starlink.
So we know Falcon is doing its thing, and we know they launch rather frequently now. Where is Starship in terms of its capability? We're not going to put a human in it right now, right? It's not ready for that kind of safety, but where is the status of that rocket? Isn't there like a Starship 3 on the horizon?
Yeah, the Starship 3 has not launched yet. That one also introduces a new rocket engine called the Raptor, which will be a huge step forward, way more power. So back to their reusability, SpaceX has caught the booster 3 times. They've reused it once, I believe. With Starship, they have never caught the second stage nor attempted it. But they have landed it in the middle of the ocean with extreme precision. They have these GPS buoys that they put out, and I think it's landed within a couple centimeters of where they expected. I don't know if they'll try to catch it this year. I would give it a 50-50 chance. Elon said that they want 2 successful version 3 Starship launches and splashdowns in the ocean before they even attempt to catch the second stage. But if you're a SpaceX investor, this might be the key part of this whole interview. If you don't listen to anything else, I would pay attention to that. The progress they make in catching the second stage and then reusing it is super critical. The other one that's important is in-space refueling. These rockets are huge, and they can't just send the thing directly to the moon. They have to send it up, put it in orbit, and then send another ship up, or maybe another 10 ships up, and refuel the thing. This thing is so massive that it needs more fuel. No one has ever done in-space refueling too. And to back up a second, it's kind of like you see military planes where there's a tanker plane and a thing comes out and then the F-16 hooks up to it and it gets more fuel, or the SR-71 if you're a really good pilot. I thought of you with the space shuttle at that museum. There's an SR-71 right in front of it. So no one has done refueling in space. I think that's less of a technological challenge because rockets dock with things all the time in space, the International Space Station and other things. So watch those 2 things. Watch for reusability and a successful catch of the second stage and the in-space refueling. I think they get there, but perhaps not this year.
Realistically, the Starship, when does it become a useful vehicle?
Probably not this year. I would say maybe late next year. Do not believe his timelines, but he usually gets it done just a couple years behind where he says it will be.
And will early Starship payloads, will that be more satellites? Is that the plan as far as do you know what the plan is for those early, once Starship is reliable and not exploding over Florida and the Caribbean? What is the first use case? Is it more satellites?
Yeah, watch out overhead. It will be more satellites, and I think specifically it'll be the next generation of the Starlink satellites, which are built for the direct-to-cell communication. So your cell phone will communicate directly to the satellite, so you'll have uninterrupted cell coverage worldwide. Those satellites are a lot bigger than the current generation. Starlink is already doing very well, but to really ramp it up, we need Starship, because I think the initial goal was 30,000 satellites. I think they have around 10,000 now, and I think they may have increased that 30,000 number.
So we've talked a little bit about Starlink. Let's go a little deeper there. Starlink is the current growth engine. They've already invested a massive amount launching these satellites into the sky, into orbit, and they are now selling satellite service. I have cable and I have Verizon in my area, but I could also get a Starlink, and Starlink unlocks high-speed internet to the globe, and the early business cases are cruise lines and airplanes, but there's much more to Starlink than just getting on Wi-Fi on your flight across country, right?
Yeah, you think of Starshield and just the military uses of it. So Starshield is the military's private network. The military also uses it for early missile detection. It can detect infrared signatures from a missile launch. And like you said, the way I like to think about Starlink and the launch business to a lesser extent is that it's a platform. It's similar to the iPhone. When the iPhone came out, I don't think anyone had any idea all the crazy things we would be doing with it. Like, did you ever expect to go on a trip and call a personal taxi on a phone, or check into your Airbnb and unlock the door with your phone? Like, of course not. So while the iPhone was cool and it was huge and amazing, the really interesting part of it is all the stuff built on top. Back to those cows, like, who could have thought that you'd be herding cows with satellites in space 10 years ago? So you alluded to this earlier, Craig. The most interesting part about Starlink is the platform and what folks are going to build on top of it. I think the internet's pretty cool, and the direct-to-cell is cool, and some of the stuff we hear about now, the cow is probably lesser cool, but very good if you're a rancher. It'll be super interesting to see what people have implemented on that in the near and long-term future.
Speaking of direct-to-cell, you've mentioned this a few times. How feasible is that for someone like you and me to use in the near future? Is there a timeline associated with what they're doing there? Are there any technical challenges that they need to overcome before direct-to-cell is a thing?
I have seen it in use. My friend Bob and I were hiking out in Rocky Mountain National Park, so we're in the middle of nowhere, and he has T-Mobile, which had the first direct-to-cell trial, and he's like, well, let's see if it works, and neither of us can get any coverage. I'll try to send a text with the satellites, and yeah, it worked fine. The main barrier is the bandwidth. You're not going to be doing a video call on it anytime soon. They need their next version of the satellites launched to increase bandwidth. You may have seen that SpaceX has been buying bandwidth from, I think EchoStar was who they bought their initial bandwidth. So I don't know how all this stuff works out, but I think they're going to enhance their satellite communication with terrestrial communication too. So what I expect them to come out with maybe in a year or two, because phones don't have the radio to talk to these signals yet, but they will. So I expect within a year or two, SpaceX will probably come out with a phone, or it'll be the backbone behind T-Mobile or some other provider. You'll just have a phone that works anywhere in any country. It'll connect to a terrestrial network through the SpaceX bandwidth that they've bought and their terrestrial ground stations, or if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it'll connect to the satellites.
Would you need a special chip in there to be able to do that? It has to be a certain kind of phone. You can't just be like an iPhone app that would be able to do it.
You are correct. The phones need new hardware, but they're already working on this. I think I don't know if they'll come out this year, but next year it'll just be a standard feature in all phones. It's not a technological hurdle. It's just a slightly different bandwidth that the phones have to communicate with.
Talking about Starlink as a moat, Bezos is working on this too, right, with Blue Origin, but he's very far behind, right?
I believe their network is slightly different. They're bigger satellites, and I think they're at a higher altitude, which will make them a little bit more latent. You won't get the super quick response that you get with Starlink, if I'm correct about this, but it's going to be very hard to compete with Starlink. One of the advantages with all Elon's company is the vertical integration. Like they actually make the satellite and they make it for cheap. They make the delivery system to get them up to space. They own the communications network too on the ground. So complete vertical integration, where someone like Amazon might have to rely on another launch provider, at least for now.
Yeah, and as they keep building and getting better and reducing the cost of the satellites and the network, and they make that investment, then just with scale, the cost is going to come down and it's going to widen that moat. So part of the launch for the IPO, when they started talking about this IPO, very suspiciously, we started hearing people talking about data centers in space. And honestly, like data centers in space was not something I heard about until about August of last year. I mean, maybe conceptually, but around the time leading up to the announcement of the initial report that SpaceX was pursuing an IPO, and that came from Katie Roof from The Information in December. It was a massive story when it came out. But leading up to that, there were these people connected to Elon, connected to SpaceX, talking about this data centers in space thing. And it seemed as though that messaging was coordinated with the IPO a little bit, that Elon, once he recognized that this was possible and part of the business pipeline, that's when he decided, man, I need to IPO so we can raise a bunch of money to make this happen. Talk to us a little bit about data centers in space. And again, this is not next year kind of stuff. There's massive engineering challenges, but the people who are good at sending things up to space and figuring out engineering challenges are the ones that would be capable of doing this. Why is that even a business case, a use case for SpaceX? And then what are the challenges with the data centers?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to access to energy. You've probably seen some of these stories in the news, Craig. I think I just saw one this week that said like over half of the data centers planned in the U.S. are either canceled or postponed. The reason for that is people do not want a data center in their backyard. They're very, very energy intensive. We've had a lot of inflation, which is not up which is not a good thing. No one wants their electrical prices to double or triple. So at my own city, Longmont, this amused me greatly because they're like, we're going to ban data centers in Longmont. I'm like, is anyone even asking for this? But you go ahead and do that. So anyway, what space gives you is it gives you unlimited energy because you can put the satellite in a heliocentric orbit, which gives it almost constant access to the sun. The solar panels are always pointed to the sun, so you get unlimited free energy once you get the thing up there. But there's two huge challenges. One of them is you've got a lot of radiation up there and you have sensitive electronic equipment. So you're going to have a bunch of chips that need to be shielded from that radiation or else they'll die quickly. The other issue that's kind of counterintuitive because space is very cold, but it's very difficult to cool things in space because all the cooling in a terrestrial data center is I'm going to get a little bit nerdy here, is conductive cooling where you have two things touching each other. So you run water through next to the processor and it cools off the processor. But what is space? Even though it's absolute zero, it is a vacuum. So when something heats up, there is nothing to transfer the heat to, so the thing just stays hot. So you have to do a different form of cooling called radiative cooling, which is a substantial problem. You look at the International Space Station, and this is it was a significant engineering challenge just to do that. And now you're talking about running a bunch of processors up there that get very, very hot, very much warmer than running one astronaut's laptop. You're going to be having hundreds or thousands of processors up there that you need to keep cool. So those are the two big challenges, the radiation and the heat dissipation. But isn't it interesting that the launch isn't itself the bottleneck? Like, okay, we can actually get something from the surface of the Earth to space, and that's not our main concern. That's not the cost issue. It's these other technological issues.
Well, they figured some of this out already with the satellites, right? There's got to be some sort of heat coming out of those and chips within the satellites too, right? So they have some experience figuring this out, but data centers, obviously, different type of chip, heavier processing, more heat.
Yeah, they do. It's all completely solvable, but it makes things expensive too. Like if you have to have a substance like platinum or gold to shield the processors, that stuff is expensive. I think there's different kind of processors though. Like you can make a processor with a different lithography mechanism. We were just in the Netherlands, Craig, so I'm thinking of ASML with their big machines, but there's different ways you can make processors that I think are more resistive to the radiation. So these aren't technological challenges that can be overcome. The other thing that's pretty interesting about the data centers in space is they're going to be used for inference processing. And what that means is there's two parts to AI. The first one is you create the models, which is creating the neural net, the big brain that answers the questions. And then there's the inference processing that when you go on ChatGPT, you ask the model a question. That is the processing that's going to be done in space, the inference processing. But SpaceX is already equipped to handle that because they've got the communications. So when you go on X8 or Grok and ask it a question, and 3 years from now, you might be communicating with a satellite via Starlink, which is pretty crazy to think about.
So the data centers would talk to Starlink. The Starlink would just pipe it down, and they would communicate that way.
Yep. So if you go on there and ask Grok a question about Uranus, you're going to be communicating with things in space. It's pretty amazing.
And Carl, we talked about how these business models develop out of capabilities and platforms like Starlink or the Starship launch. One of the interesting business models that I've been following is potentially getting solar energy from space and beaming the energy back to space. There's a company called Etherflux, I think, is working on this. One of the founders of Robinhood started that business. But that isn't possible without the low-cost launch capabilities. When I think of the data centers in space, it also reminds me of that potential business model, just having solar panels beaming energy down. And it's kind of hard to grasp that concept that it's even possible, but these people wouldn't be starting businesses if it wasn't going to be feasible. It's just engineering challenges away. Physics rules and laws aren't blocking this kind of business.
I haven't studied that specific company or that technology a whole lot. I know they use microwaves to beam it back down, but it's amazing that someone would consider doing that, like launching this huge thing to space, and you're going to have a huge array of solar panels, and that's an easier solution than putting a bunch of them in like southern Nevada or the the desert of Arizona. I guess what you get with space is you get uninterruptible power. So maybe it's not an issue of cost. Maybe it's an issue of just having consistent power that's going to be there 100%, which you don't get with a panel on the ground.
Yeah, I was also watching an interview with Elon, and he was talking about how they were trying to build a power plant, I think maybe with Colossus, or they're trying to build something, and he hit a roadblock because of some bureaucracy. Whatever local organization he had to file to build a power plant, they said, well, put in that application, then we'll look at it in 6 months and we'll respond to you. And there are these bureaucratic roadblocks that certainly slow down the speed of innovation, but combined with the NIMBY, people don't want this stuff in their backyards, and then this broader trend of being anti-AI. If you're a lot of older people, they just don't like AI. It's clogging up their Facebook feed, and it's robocalling them. And so older people who don't own Anthropic and OpenAI, who haven't been able to participate in the growth of those companies, don't like AI. In fact, I think AI has like a lower approval rating than like Congress or something like that. Like it's everyone hates Congress, but they hate AI even more. This idea of power up in space, you don't have to deal with all the regulations. You don't have a bureaucrat who is just angry at you for some reason and wants to block a bill or a application. There's no politics involved. You just get it up to space and you beam it back down.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people who were skeptical about the whole data centers in space were basing their arguments off cost, and it may cost more. But maybe that's not the issue, and maybe that's not why these companies are doing it. It's an arms race, right? You're always reading like which model's ahead and who's ahead in the AI race. So maybe it's a race to get it done quicker, and maybe it does cost more, at least initially, but then you don't have to deal with the power issues and the angry old politicians who might not even know. I saw one politician, I think she meant to say AI, but in her news conference, she kept on referring to it as A1, like that crappy steak sauce. like, we will not have A1 in our backyard. We do not want A1. Like, I don't want A1 either. Like, don't put that on a good steak. So maybe space just makes it easier, even though it does cost more. But if it was just Elon making these crazy proclamations about data centers in space, I would be skeptical because he's got some big, wild ideas, but there's a lot of other people talking about it as well. So that gives it credence.
Yeah, Sam Altman's been talking about it. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, I think he bought Relativity Space. That's another launch company. They build 3D rockets. Jeff Bezos certainly talking about it, and that's part of the reason why he's building Blue Origin. So yeah, it's not just Elon, and certainly some other venture capitalists and scientists have been out there on podcasts talking about it. CEO of Google was out there talking about it as well. So this is not just an Elon thing. Let's talk about some other Elon big picture ideas or aspirational ideas that would expand his TAM, his total addressable market. One of the ideas is that in order to get more satellites and more data centers in space, to reduce the cost even more, why not manufacture them on the moon and then launch them from the moon into orbit? And he's talked about this thing called a mass driver. And I saw him in an interview say the mass driver on the moon, he's hoping to get that done in his lifetime. That he said something like, it'd be just very cool to have a mass driver on the moon. As aspirational as this is, tell us about what a mass driver on the moon would do and why is he even talking about such a thing?
Ooh, so the moon has much less gravitational pull. Think about it this way. The lander, when humans landed there, was like the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and that thing could easily take off. And then think about the rockets you need to take off from Earth, and at least 95% of the weight of the rocket is fuel. So it's really easy to get off the moon. You don't need nearly as much effort. So a mass driver is kind of like one of those maglev trains, a big magnetic racetrack or a big magnetic linear track, like a rocket sled or a straight atom accelerator that brings things up to speed and then launches them back to Earth. So I think I heard one estimate the thing would have to be about 4 kilometers long. So then what you could do is send robots or humans up there, get the helium-3, or there's lots of valuable things on the moon, grab those things, pack them up. You can use the crust of the moon to shield the material for re-entry, and then you send it back to Earth. Much easier than having to create fuel or whatever. You just need electricity. You just need a small amount of solar panels to generate the electricity for this mass driver, and then you can get whatever you want off the moon.
it sounds very cool and something that Elon would want to talk about. But as of now, we think of it as a business model, how that probably wouldn't be feasible. But 5-10 years from now, maybe costs have come down. They have a good plan for it. The robots, the Tesla robots would be able to handle that on the moon. And there's obviously tons of challenges there. It seems like the cost would be extraordinary and doesn't make sense today. But looking ahead, maybe it does make sense. So speaking of these vanity projects, he's also talked about Mars, and Mars doesn't really make good business sense, right? It's cool. It would help us expand the footprint of humanity. But how do you think about Mars as a SpaceX shareholder?
Yeah, it is cool. I think when a human lands on Mars, which I think we will see in our lifetime, probably before 2040 or right around that, I think that'd be awesome. It would be like the moment all our parents talked about with the moon. But I don't see, if you're a SpaceX shareholder and you view it as an investment, I don't see how that makes money. And Elon's thinking big here. I saw the rumor is that one of his pay tranches was tied to having a moon colony or a Mars colony of 1 million people. That's insane. And I'm very skeptical that happens in our lifetime, and especially not Elon's. He's a little bit older. Yeah, I don't see how you make money going to Mars and what you have to do to get over there, like having 1 million people there. I think I figured it out. You'd have to send 5,000 starships over there, 200 people a starship. So 5,000 of them, which is a lot of spacecraft. And then you have to get all the infrastructure, which is probably just as many to build structures there and everything else you need to live on Mars. If you're a SpaceX shareholder and you've bought it to make money, I don't see where they're going to make money from Mars. I would be a little bit worried about that, I think, because, and that is, to be clear, that is Elon's end goal. Starlink was created to fund all of these space ambitions, and Mars is the main ambition.
Yeah, there was a time, for quite a long time, actually, they had talked about, or Elon had tweeted about Starlink being the business to spin off into an IPO and keeping SpaceX as a private company. And they really only let go of that idea when the announcement came out in December of 2025 that they were planning to just do the whole thing. And I think Mars was the reasoning behind that. It was like, well, that doesn't make sense to go to Mars, but SpaceX could have retained the public Starlink shares and then benefited from that public growth. But it does seem like that's out of the question now, as he's decided to go public and build out these other potential business models, that Mars is going to go on a hiatus, and maybe they'll experiment, sending a rocket ship there every once in a while. But just the same, once the data centers in space is profitable, or the mass driver on the moon, that could potentially unlock an unknown business case for Mars in 20 years or something. We just don't know.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch if nothing else.
So speaking of robots and putting robots on the moon, onto Mars, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of, I think, maybe hope that now that SpaceX has acquired XAI, that Tesla might eventually become part of SpaceX. What are your thoughts on this idea of the convergence of all of Elon's companies into one?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a very big question. It would be interesting. I've heard rumors, I don't think this is true or will happen, that Gwynne Shotwell, who runs SpaceX, might take over the whole thing, which would be interesting, but she's over 60 and probably doesn't want to live that intense life forever. But back to the merging of the companies, I think it would be beneficial to them because there is a lot of overlap. Like they're all working on processors, Tesla for the inference processing for the car and generating models to train the car, all the XAI stuff, which is similar. They're going to need it for the robots. So I think there is a lot of overlap. So the example I could think, I'll back up a second. Say Starlink was a separate company and they had to pay for their launches. Now they get the launches at cost because SpaceX and Starlink are the same company. But if they had to pay for them, Starlink might not be viable because it would be like triple the cost because they'd have to pay the going market rate. So by merging the companies, they could all work together more easily and it would eliminate those barriers. So if you really think these companies have a lot of overlap, and I think they do, I think it's probably a good idea. Like the first thing to go to Mars won't be a human. It'll be an Optimus robot that'll step out of the ship and walk around on Mars or fall over on Mars. So there's a lot of overlap, and I think it is a good idea. Whatever makes it easier for them to get their stuff done and achieve their goals, I would vote for.
And I think the XAI acquisition was just easier since it was still a private company. SpaceX probably owns some shares, a lot of shareholder overlap on that. But with Tesla being a public company and much larger, that's one barrier, and there could be some sort of bureaucrat that steps in and says they don't want that to happen. But the other thing about SpaceX is this IPO is a once in a lifetime, I would call it, opportunity to just really splash in the market and raise. They're saying 75 billion. I think it could easily be 100 billion if they wanted to raise that much. And so that IPO is just that opportunity that you're not going to get again. There are other ways to access capital once it's public, but that IPO is that one big opportunity. And so if they could walk away with 75 billion or 100 billion, that's a lot of cash to say no to. If you're going to do like a pre-IPO merger, SpaceX and Tesla just merge now, then that wouldn't really be an opportunity. So it does make sense, and I think a lot of Tesla shareholders would like that, but we'll see if people change their tune once SpaceX is public and Tesla is public and they're kind of operating separately. We'll see how that goes. A couple other things I wanted to touch on in terms of XAI. The XAI is the laggard when it comes to LLM models. There's OpenAI, there's Anthropic, and Gemini, which are the top three. And Elon has said that maybe they made some mistakes with Grok and XAI, but they're correcting those mistakes. They have built this Colossus data center in Tennessee, which apparently is not even being utilized to its full capacity. And so they've announced effectively they're going to acquire Cursor, which is AnySphere. It's another company we talk about on the show quite a bit. It's a vibe coding company, and that gives XAI this access to coding, which has surprisingly been the really heavy use case for the LLMs, the large language models. So XAI is really positioning itself to catch up to these other big players. Tell us what you know about Colossus, and then a follow-up to that, Terafab. I don't really even know what Terafab is. I could look on the website right now. I know they talked about it, but can you talk to us about those two words that we hear them talking about a lot?
Yeah, so with Colossus, I'm not super familiar with it, but I do know they stood up a bunch of infrastructure super, super quickly, which was quite the accomplishment. I think it was like 57 days or something. And it'll be interesting. So I think if XAI is successful, it'll be successful because they're working from the bottom up. They've got the infrastructure, which a lot of places are lacking. Like I've heard Anthropic and maybe even ChatGPT are throttling stuff back or not allowing as much access as they could just because they don't have the power. But apparently, and I read the same thing as you, that XAI isn't even using what they have. So XAI has the opposite problem. So it'll be super interesting to see if they could leverage Colossus to gain back their momentum and catch up with some of these other companies' models. The Terafab, Elon wants to make their own chips, which is a crazy goal. I was talking to a friend in this space, and we were talking about the autonomous cars, and he's like, well, what's even crazier is like trying to make their own chips. You look at what ASML did. It's taken them 4 decades to make these things, and these are the most complex, most sophisticated machines in the world, like a top-of-the-line ASL machine. I believe does lithography, there's that hard word to say again, to 2 nanometers. So it prints circuits, transistors, whatever, 2 nanometers. So Elon is trying to duplicate what ASML has done, which took him decades to do. I'm skeptical.
Clarification here. So he's trying to build the machine that builds chips, not just the chips themselves. The ASML machine, they're the only company in the world that does it. It's a Holland-based company, and it's this massive machine. That's what you need for the NVIDIA top-of-the-line chips in the world. That machine is the only machine that can do it. And you're saying Elon's trying to build that machine to build chips?
I think they're looking at other processes, and it's not just them. Like they're working with Intel. They're working with partners to do this, but it does seem like they're trying to do this from scratch. Like the ASML machines have a wait. I don't think you can buy one until 2028, and they're not cheap either. And you don't buy just one. Usually you buy them like 4 of them at the same time, which I guess they could buy with their IPO funds.
Right.
But,
I think they run like 400 million or something like that, a ridiculous amount.
Yeah, no one's really sure what they're trying to do. I read a little bit about it, and they might be trying to do some completely new chip process. I think it was called gallium sulfide, which bypasses the ASL machines. But again, this stuff is insane and such a huge scale. It'll be crazy to see what they're able to do. But I think they've already broken ground on their Terafab facility that they're going to make all this stuff. It's end-to-end, like most places, even with a processor, you source parts, but they want to make the whole thing under one roof, which is very, very, very ambitious. The only thing harder than launching a rocket and catching a rocket, perhaps.
So is that a SpaceX thing or is it a Tesla thing? Isn't it sort of a joint build, the Terafab? Do you know?
Oh, I read about that. Like, I think it said like Tesla's going to be working on the design, but not the actual build. XAI SpaceX will be responsible for the factory that builds these things.
Yeah, if you go to terafab.ai, it says Tesla, XAI, SpaceX. So it's already showing signs of the convergence of the three. Well, two are already together, but convergence of all of his businesses together.
Yep. And the Optimus needs a very sophisticated chip. So if you have an autonomous car, it's got an inference chip in there. Like Elon has said that the robot will require one 100 times as powerful, so they're not messing around. And
you have a Tesla FSD, right?
Yeah, I do. I bought the thing because Elon had pivoted the company to robotaxis. I think there will come a time when Tesla sells very few cars to consumers, that they just produce robotaxis. So because I had a lot of Tesla shares, I thought it was important for me to keep up with FSD progress. So I bought one in 2023, and I've used the FSD almost the whole time.
Really? So you just let it drive for you nowadays?
Yeah, it was when I bought the thing in 2023, I remember this. Like, I'm driving around, and there was a person in front of me, and the car kind of like stops to wait for the person. And then it started to accelerate towards the person. I'm like, bad car, you haven't even achieved consciousness yet. You cannot run over humans. But now it's gotten super good. It's gotten to the point, it's startling, where I would feel more comfortable having the car drive than most of the humans that I have to drive with. And like, my wife Mindy's actually a pretty good driver, but she's very aggressive and she yells at people. I'm like, can we just let the car drive? And she's like, no, I will not let the car drive. She's terrified of it, but she shouldn't be. In the past 6,000 miles I keep track, I've had to intervene once. So it's gotten very, very good, and it sees things and detects things and reacts to them before I have a chance. It's kind of like slow motion, like I'll see a human or kid dart out or a car back out, and I'm like reaching for the steering wheel, and by the time I've moved like 2 inches, the car has already taken action for this situation. It's amazing. It's eventually going to save lives, no matter what your thoughts are about Elon. This technology is good. I'm going off on a big tangent here, Craig. I'll shut up in a second.
Well, it's important because it's all part of the storyline here. That they had this ambitious, and this like 2015 self-driving cars. Everyone said it's coming, and it took a long time, but it's here. And everyone else has worked. There's other people working on it, and this is just, it's not going away. It's not really a risk, but it's just an adoption thing. Are my parents going to use that? And the answer is no. But I did actually talk to someone in our community who said that her husband had surgery and he doesn't like drive, and they bought a Tesla and they just let it drive for them everywhere in like rural Georgia. So there are early adopters who are not just people in Longmont, Colorado, just going around the neighborhoods. This is like a real use case for people that have handicaps or just don't have good eyesight, or they don't want to rely on Uber. So there's a lot of uses for it.
Yeah, it's a safety thing too. Your parents say they won't use it, but what happens when they turn 85 and their license has been taken away? Are they going to sit at home, try to catch a bus, or do this? I think people will come around to it. The other thing about this, no matter what your thoughts are about Elon or anything else, like 40,000 people a year die in auto accidents. It's like 3,000 people a month. It's like a plane load of people every day, and over 90% of those are caused by human error. Once the robot cars take over, and it might not be Tesla, it might be Waymo or some other company that we haven't even heard of, the roads are going to be much, much safer for everyone. Like, I can think of multiple people in my life. My grandmother died in a car accident, and I think in a couple decades, it's going to take a while. Cars have to turn over and all that, but by the time our kids are our age, I think car accidents are going to be rare. It'll be pretty crazy to see, and a great positive change for humans.
Well, one of the unintended benefits that your wife Mindy found is you can curse and focus on giving people the middle finger while the car does all the driving, right?
Yeah, I should sell her. You should talk to her, Craig. I should sell her on that. Yeah, she could devote more time to road rage if she let the car drive itself and be a more effective road rager. Yeah, she's yelled at people a couple times, and then they yell back, and then I take. Yeah, it's never a good situation.
I've given a finger once or twice and regretted it. You know, in Washington D.C., it's not a good idea.
Yeah, don't engage. Just look away or be the better person.
So we talk about Elon's businesses, but we often forget that he bought X, Twitter. He bought Twitter, changed it to X, and that's part of XAI, and XAI was acquired by SpaceX. So SpaceX now owns Twitter, what used to be Twitter and is now called X. I don't think he should have changed that name. I kind of think that was a bad idea, as we all still call it Twitter. Are you still using Twitter, or are you still paying attention there, or what do you think about that as a SpaceX business? You're a SpaceX shareholder.
Twitter is probably not a good business, but I do use it. I never ever click on the For You tab. That is a recipe for disaster. There's like violence and sex and all kinds of bad things that you should not be looking at, and they're just trying to suck you in, get you to engage. But how I do use it is I try to find people that care about stuff that I care about, that are smarter than me, which isn't too hard. And so I've created a curated list of like SpaceX people and Tesla people, and I see what they have to say, because I've got my own thoughts on this. As you can tell, we've been yapping for an hour, but I really need people smarter than me, engineers who have their ears to the ground. So that's how I use it, just to pay attention to a couple very, very specific people, maybe like 10 or 20. It's more than a couple, but yeah, that's how I use it. Don't click on the For You tab, though. Bad.
You know, that For You tab goes through periods of being good, because you go through your tweet. I don't follow that many people, but I go over to the For You, and then sometimes it's good, and then next thing you know, it starts going to these like TikTok videos where, people are doing projects, and it's just like very fascinating to watch. Like, oh, this guy's taking a piece of wood, and what's he gonna do with it? And now he's cooking on a rock, and it's just like, I don't go to Twitter for that reason. And that's why I don't go to Instagram or and I just don't watch shorts, because they're so addictive. And one of the things about this filing that we're expected to see this month is we're gonna see the dirty laundry. So SpaceX is gonna be at the top, right? Like, oh, we do all this cool stuff, and then you're gonna get down like, oh, well, by the way, we own this thing called X, and you're gonna see, is it making any money? How bad did Elon overpay for it? I think he paid $44 billion. It's probably not worth that much. And so we've been talking so much about the bull case for SpaceX and the 10-year bull case, but what are the things that, to try to keep this balance a little bit, like what are the things that could derail this company? What are some of the big risks aside from timelines?
Ooh, I think the biggest one is the rocket technology in itself. They, like we talked about earlier, they still have not caught the second stage, and that's like catching the first stage is a huge, very impressive accomplishment. Catching the second stage is way, way harder. So that's the first thing, if they can't get that straight. And they've been trying to do it for a long time and experimenting with different ways to shield the vehicle for reentry. So that's number one. I'm curious to see if some of Elon's ambitions go awry too. The one I can think of right now is the Dojo chip. Elon had this idea that they would create their own big tile chip thing for AI training, and then it went up in flames. It failed. The cars, like you said, everyone would be driving around in a Tesla autonomous car in 2019, and we're not there yet. Some of his ambitions are very big, like how much money are they going to sink into this Terafab thing? It's going to cost billions and billions just to attempt this, and who knows if it's going to be successful. They couldn't even create their own Dojo chip using other people's stuff, and now they're going to try to create the whole thing from the ground up. So lots of execution risks here.
Once it's public and there's quarterly earnings reports, or maybe it's going to be biannual now or semi-annual, there's going to be these Wall Street metrics that the analysts latch on to. And for Tesla, it was, I think, car delivery, right? How many cars you're delivering, and that was the key number that you're always watching. And with SpaceX, it's going to come under pressure to meet milestones. Like, hey, they're going to ask, shareholders are going to ask, okay, when are you going to do this? When are you going to accomplish this thing? And they're going to have to either deliver or not. And if they don't deliver that execution, then that could tumble the stock. So we always talk about and assume that this stock's just going to go up and continue to go up, but there are real risks here, and like you said, Carl, with the launch risks and the progress it makes, the longer that drags on, the more likely it is that shareholders lose patience.
Yeah, if you buy this company, you're buying it for what you hoped it looks like in 2035 and 9 or 10 years from now. You're not buying it for its current state. And yeah, I agree with you, Craig. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road between now and then. And yeah, once we see all their dirty laundry, I think it just came out that SpaceX bought a sizable number of Cybertrucks that might not fly well as a public company. That's probably a not great use of anyone's money. So yeah, we're buying this. If you buy this, if you're interested in it, do not go by the quarterly reports or maybe even the annual progress. This is a multi-year, maybe even multi-decade investment. You're betting that Elon is going to be mining helium-3 from the moon in 2040 and landing a human on Mars in 2045. So very, very big, but very, very choppy in the interim.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in our investment community and viewers and just ordinary investors are always hoping to make money fast. And these generational opportunities like NVIDIA or Tesla, these are not the get-rich-quick schemes, right? You have to buy and be patient. You're a Google holder as well. You've held Google since the IPO, I think you told me. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, so to really participate in those long-term gains, it takes time. A lot of times, older retirees, maybe they feel like they don't have as much time, and so they don't have the patience. And I think just want to emphasize that if you're going to be thinking about investing in the SpaceX IPO, you need at least a 5 at a minimum, but likely a 10 or 20-year investment horizon is going to be where you should be thinking, and not so much in the short term and hoping for a quick win on the IPO date.
No, don't look for a quick win. When I first heard rumblings about the IPO, I didn't think they would do it before they had caught Starship, because it's such an important thing for them to do. And they definitely will not have caught it if it IPOs in June. They won't, or not even attempted it by then. Version 3 might not even launch before then. So yes, hold on to this for a long time, and don't pay attention to daily things. I'm kind of curious. After it goes public, if the second stage blows up, or rapid unintended disassembly, I think RUD, as Elon calls it, if it blows up over the Bahamas, I'll bet the stock price will take like a 5 to 10% hit the next morning.
Yeah, that's wild to think about, if they're going to be launching during the open hours of the market, and to see what's going to happen with the stock price. And then you already have the prediction markets highlighting SpaceX, or you can bet on things, which I don't recommend people do. It's not investing, but if you go on those prediction markets, there's always something SpaceX related that you can bet on or take a guess on. And so, yeah, SpaceX launches during the open markets. That's going to be something else to watch. If they were to land the second stage, for example, while the market's open at like 3 o'clock, what would happen to the stock?
It'd be cool to have the ticker symbol up when they try to catch the second stage for the first time, and see the stock go up as it's successful. And then if it blows up the launch pad, then it just crashes.
Someone will do that. Someone will do that for sure. All right. So, Carl, you already own a substantial stake in SpaceX, just due to your hustling and finding that opportunity back a few years ago. Are you going to try to participate in the IPO, or what's your thoughts on investing more capital into SpaceX?
I don't think so. And it's only because, like, let's say it IPOs at $2 trillion, or it reaches that, it'll be half of my portfolio. I don't need any more than that. I'm comfortable with that. So no, it's not that I don't believe in it. It's that I don't need any more.
You'll be watching it, though. You'll definitely be watching it.
I definitely will. If it crashed for no good reason, like I bought Facebook when it IPO'd too, and I think it IPO'd at 42, and it crashed down. It crashed down into the teens shortly after. But my fundamental hypothesis of Facebook was still intact, so I doubled my shares. I bought another 1,000 shares. And I can see myself, if something like that happens, maybe picking up more if I think the stock has crashed for a silly reason. But otherwise, I would just hold on to it. I'd say the other main risk for SpaceX is that something happens to Elon, and to a lesser extent, Gwen Shotwell. She runs it, and brilliant business person. I don't know if SpaceX would have survived without her guiding and without her being a tempering force to Elon's ambition. I'll leave it at that.
You know, speaking of your investment strategy and mine as well, we're both primarily index investors, right? This kind of started as invest 90% of your wealth into index funds and maybe speculate with 5 to 10%. You just happen to speculate with some of the most generational, opportunities over the last couple of decades with Google, Facebook, in SpaceX. So you're not a stock picker, Carl, right? You're more just like a technology guy that is not a tech bro, but you're a technology fan, space fan who just saw these opportunities with these extraordinary companies. But you're not saying buy this or that. Like you're not that kind of investor, right?
No, and to back up a second, I own most of these stocks because I started my blog in 2013, and I think I discovered index investing like around 2014 or 2015, but I had been investing before then. For example, the Google IPO was August of 2004, so I was buying, and I think Facebook was 2012. I was buying all these stocks before I knew what an index fund was, and then I just hold on to them. One of my critical litmus tests for buying a stock, I don't do it often, it's something I would feel comfortable holding on to 10 years. So if I were forced to hold on to this for 10 years and not be able to sell it, that's what I'm comfortable buying. And when you put that litmus test up to something, very, very, very few things hold up to that. And it's becoming harder now because technology is advancing so quickly. But yeah, from here on out, I have one other private company, Impulse Space. We've talked about that a little bit, but I don't think I'll probably do anything exotic after this. If I do sell SpaceX, it'll go into an index fund if I don't need the money for something else. So yeah, I do believe index investing is the right way to go for almost everyone, unless your last name is Munger and he's dead, or Buffett, or one of those other big names. Yeah, stick with the index funds. You'll hold a lot of SpaceX in your index fund.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I was a primarily individual stock investor till about a decade ago and just really started focusing more on not trying to pick stocks, but these types of companies that we highlight on the show are not stocks that you can invest in typically, and that's why when they IPO, they go into your index fund. And we have these three big ones potentially this year with SpaceX, possibly Anthropic, and possibly OpenAI this year or early next year. And unfortunately, retail investors haven't had a chance to invest. For the most part, there's a few ways you could have. We've talked about that on the show, but when these IPO, they then enter into our index funds. And if SpaceX is the first $10 trillion company, or if it's NVIDIA, we already own it because it's a big part of our index investing.
When I buy a stock, I intend to hold it until something better comes up, and that doesn't mean an investment. I'm in Colorado. If I want to buy a mountain house, that sounds like a lot more fun than holding SpaceX stock. Maybe I'd sell some of it at that point. I hold SpaceX in retirement funds too. Half of it's in a Roth IRA. The other half is in a self-directed solo 401k. So it's kind of stuck there unless I do something exotic like a 72T, but I don't gamble. I don't buy anything for the short term. When I bought SpaceX, I intended to hold it through 2035 or through 2040 for a very long time. That's how long you'll have to hold it to see it really become what it has the potential to become.
All right, Carl. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Just a few last things about you. So what are you? You're not a full-time investor, right? What is your past career? What is your current state? Like, what do you do right now? I know you've written about financial independence and leaving the workforce. What are you up to these days, and where can people find you?
Yeah, I was a software developer. I stopped doing that in 2017. Since then, I've done a lot of crazy things. I own a co-working space with Mr. Money Mustache. I do real estate, but more fix and flips. I'm sitting in the basement of the one I still have yet to finish, and we're actually, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Craig, but we're building a house, which is almost done. That was a pretty weird thing to do in life that I didn't think I would ever do, but it's been a joyous experience, and we're going to move into a house I finally like, instead of buying a house you think will be good to sell to someone else. So been a super fun project.
Where can people find you, Carl?
My website is 1500days.com, 1500days.com. That name is there because that was the amount of days I thought it would take me to retire after I discovered financial independence. I really do love talking about this stuff. One real quick last thing I'll say is I don't buy stocks, I buy companies, so I'm not interested. A stock is a reflection on the health of a company. I bought SpaceX because of their technology. I bought Google because I liked what they were doing, super innovative, and they were doing all kinds of super neat stuff. So I love talking about the core business, and I couldn't care less about the swings of the stock price. But where I was going with that is if people want to shoot me an email or talk more about this, or if you want to tell me I'm crazy or say some mean things to me, send those over to Craig, and he'll hopefully delete them. I'm kind of sensitive.
Carl Jensen, well, thanks for joining the show and sharing your insights on SpaceX and why all the hype, the 10-year bull case, maybe some skepticism I think that Elon really deserves. But it's helpful because we have a lot of viewers who want to invest in this deal, not just the IPO, but the long-term prospects. But maybe not everybody understands the business as well as they should understand the business if they're going to be investing in the long term. So thanks for coming on and sharing your insights and everything you know about the space industry and SpaceX itself.
You're welcome, Craig. This was super fun, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks to Carl Jensen for coming on the show and sharing his experience with investing in SpaceX and all of his knowledge from following this company for probably much longer than a lot of us. If you're still here watching, most listeners have probably tuned out by now, but if you're still here watching, I know this is not the usual format. It's definitely longer than most episodes, but I didn't want to rush this conversation because there are so many things to unpack with this SpaceX IPO and with the longer term investment thesis. You can't really talk about that in 25 minutes, the length of a normal show. And I also may have Carl back on to talk about SpaceX in a few months after this deal goes through, or maybe after the lockup periods or after the first quarterly report. If you'd like to see Carl back on to talk about SpaceX even after the IPO, then let me know in the comments below. I don't usually follow up on these post-IPO companies, but so many of you found the podcast through SpaceX. I'm willing to make an exception and talk about SpaceX in the future because we are so interested in it, and so many of you will become long-term shareholders either through the IPO or post-IPO, and a lot of you are existing shareholders. There's a lot of you found a way to invest in an SPV or through a venture capital fund, some of the ones we've talked about on the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you consume your podcast, and I really need some reviews on Spotify. So if you listen there, I'd really appreciate it if you give me a 5-star review there or on Apple Podcast to help spread the word about the work I'm doing here. And if you're ready to up your game, we have this Patreon community. It's a membership community. It's private. We don't allow any trolls or bots in there. And that's where we're preparing for the SpaceX IPO together. It's not too late. If you watched my How to Invest in SpaceX IPO episode, you know what's coming down the line and when to be prepared. But it's coming soon. It should be this month. But if you're looking for additional support to help guide you through the investment process or where to find shares or how to think about the IPO strategically, join our Access Club. That's our Patreon community. Go to patreon.com/accessipos. You can connect directly with me. There's a SpaceX IPO chat, and there's lots of people who are experienced in this kind of stuff talking about the deal. So we'd love to have you join us there. Go to accessipos.com, go to the red starburst in the menu. You can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter there. That's where I give a recap of the show and talk about some of the news we didn't talk on the show about. This week, I decided to not do an IPO radar section. News has been kind of slow. Plus, I knew this interview was going to be pretty long. It's going to be a long episode. So we'll be back with the IPO radar section next week. Thank you to the viewers, especially the ones who are still here after this very long episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you next week. This video is not a recommendation to buy or sell any startups, IPOs, stocks, or funds mentioned. IPO and pre-IPO investing involves significant risk. Conduct due diligence by reading the SEC S1 filing or other materials before investing in private companies or IPOs. Do not invest with money you cannot afford to lose. The host may be long startups, funds, or public companies mentioned in the show. See the show notes for additional disclosures.